welcome back to Everdeen, or welcome for the very first time if you're new. I'm Cara. I'm the current owner slash caretaker of Everdeen House, which is this house in the middle of the French countryside. It was built in the year 1800, so it's 224 years old, which puts it smack dab in the Bridgerton period. Today we're going to be talking about Bridgerton because it is so big right now, whether you're a fan or whether you're someone who's maybe just seen the publicity for it and is kind of curious. Bridgerton is a series on Netflix. It is super fun to watch. It's set in the Regency period, and it's kind of a romance novel feel, but with that period drama genre around it. What we could call quasi-historical, because while there are a lot of actual historical elements and even some characters that are based on real people, like for example, Queen Charlotte and King George, a lot of it is also kind of mixed around and modified to be more entertaining and fit more into that romance genre. So today I thought it would be a really fun video to do some time traveling and talk about a little bit of Bridgerton, a little bit about the actual Regency era, which was also the Napoleonic era here in France, and a little bit about what houses in daily life were back then. Because renovating this house, being in this house, you really see some things that are a little bit hidden if you're just watching on TV or if you're studying as a historian. There's really some practical things that you kind of get to know when you're living in a house that is from that period, when you're walking through the same rooms that people in the Bridgerton era, people in the Regency era would have been walking through. You get a feel for their lives that's quite special. So I wanted to share that with you guys today. And we're going to take a little tour through the house. I'm going to show you a few hidden secrets that are still left over from this house's original construction and would have affected people's daily life back in the Regency era. So first, before we get started, I want to talk about what is the Regency era. The Regency era in England was from about 1800 to about the 1830s. And it's the era when the Prince Regent, the future King George IV, took over from his father, King George III, who was still alive, but who was mentally incapacitated. Now we think he might have had a disease that affects your mental capabilities, such as porphyria or something of that type. But he was mentally incapacitated. He was unable to be king. And his son, the Prince Regent, took over. Regent means someone who is ruling in the place of the king, even though the king is still alive. And that was why it's called the Regency era in England. Now in France, we had a little bit of a different situation because we didn't have a king anymore. He had been beheaded. This is just after the French Revolution. The French Revolution kind of ground to a halt in the end of the 1790s. 1799 was when Napoleon first became the consul and started shifting over to that Napoleonic era. Obviously, the nobility had been largely guillotined or driven into exile in France. Things were still very tumultuous, to say the least, very tumultuous. And I find that really interesting in the context of this house because this house was built in the 1800s and things must have been a huge upheaval. And this is not a small or easy to build house. This is just the main part of the house, a 7-bedroom house. There are also several large outbuildings. There's also several smaller outbuildings. At the time, it would have also been connected to a big plot of land because it was a farmer's house, a gentleman farmer, which means someone who is a farmer, but a little bit more well-off, a little bit more well-to-do. And I think it's really interesting that we've just finished the revolution and someone's like, let's build a great big house, especially after what happened to most of the aristocrats at that time. But build it they did, and here we are in Everdeen. So in France, it's called the Napoleonic era. Now, this is also an era you might be familiar with through the works of Jane Austen. This is the time that Jane Austen lived and the time that she wrote about. I like to think about this house as similar to something that the Bennets in Pride and Prejudice might have lived in. It's not a posh house. It's not a big country estate, but it's also not like a village person's a village person. Yeah, the construction worker and the police chief did not live in this house. It's not a villager house. It's someone who would have been more well off than your average person, but also wasn't really in the ranks of the nobility. Most of the main characters in Jane Austen's works would have been sort of in this social class of the type of people who might have lived in a house like this. Even the upper classes would have spent time in areas like this. I'm in the Auvergne region of France, and there are basically 500,000 million chateaus, scientific estimate. There's a chateau, if you throw a rock out of the window, you will hit a chateau. And that's because people in this era had stately homes or country homes that were maybe a chateau, maybe a castle, maybe just like a manor house. And they also would have a townhouse. And it was fashionable to spend part of the year in your townhouse in London, or in this case, Paris, and to spend part of the year in your country home or your country estate. So you would have had the nobility hanging out in the same area as well. You would have seen their homes and maybe encountered them from time to time, even if you're not a member of that class. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a feel for the time period that we're in, but let's go around. I'm going to do a little tour of the house, and we're going to talk about some things that show you what life would have been like in this time period. The first thing I want to talk to you guys about today is bathrooms. Why are we talking about bathrooms? Why is our voyage in time starting with a trip to the bathroom? Well, I'll tell you why. Because although there's a bathroom right behind me, as well as a shower room right behind my head, and there are bathrooms on each floor of this house, none of them are original. In fact, when this house was built, there were no bathrooms in it at all. Why is that? Obviously, people had to use the toilet during Regency times, just like now, but the norm was very different. The norm would have been to have a chamber pot in your room or to go outside to use the outhouse in the back. Especially for people living in the countryside, this was just a part of daily life. It seemed totally normal in the way that having a small bathroom to us seems totally normal now. Obviously, there were people in cities, more wealthy people who were building houses that were like the height of luxury and designed for that, and might have had a slightly different situation, but for most people, this is what was going on. It's very interesting to see how people have compensated for that since the house was originally built. For example, in this room, in the living room here, we've got this wall that sections off the bathroom and the shower room. It's a purely cosmetic wall. It is not in any way structural. It was built much later than the house was originally built. There were massive renovations several times in the house's history. The most recent was 1950s. I know that because of all the 1950s era wiring I have had to pull out of this house. It's been a journey, guys. It's been a journey. But you can really tell when you look carefully, especially when we renovated this room, that this wall is not in any way original. It is much later than the original construction of the house. It also creates a big problem when you're trying to work in an older house like this, because they were not planned for modern plumbing. The big problem that we're facing right now is that this bathroom is connected to the sewer, which is right underneath us, on the east side of the house. On the west side of the house, there is the biggest bathroom, which is the first floor bathroom. I think it was originally built as a small bedroom. And it is I'm going to say roughly 800,000 miles away from the sewer connection. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but it just feels that way based on like how complicated it's going to be to sort out the pipes. Pipes have been a struggle since I arrived in this house, since I bought this house, because originally, while this toilet was connected to the sewer, because thank God I didn't have to deal with doing that, but there's a sink, and the sink went directly in a pipe out the wall into the garden, which doesn't sound that bad until you think about all of the soap and products that are getting pumped every time you wash your hands directly onto the plants in the garden, and especially when you need to do things like wash out paintbrushes from renovations, becomes a big problem very fast. Now, my fantastic and talented and skilled boyfriend Laurent has connected this sink to the sewer, but we're still in a big conundrum about what to do about the bathroom on the west side of the house. Let's go look at that, and I'll explain the problem to you a little bit more. I will warn you now, this is a construction zone, so you're going to see some mess. But in this bathroom at the moment, we have the bathtub, and we have a sink. There's no toilet because of aforementioned plumbing problem, and both the bathtub and the sink come right out here through the window and empty straight into the garden, directly onto the grapevines, where our grapes will be lovely and soap and paint flavored. Another big structural difference you can see in houses from the Bridgerton/Regency era is that the rooms tend to be smaller. So I'm here in one of our first floor bedrooms. We call this one the Rococo room. And you can see that while it's a comfortable size, it is not giant. You might be used to seeing really big, massive, spacious, high-ceilinged rooms in period dramas on TV or in movies. And while those do exist, definitely in chateaus and big manor houses and palaces, The norm for the upper middle class or the lower nobility class would have been small rooms like this. Why? Because just the same as today, it is very expensive to heat a big room, especially when you're trying to do it by burning something that you have to pay for over and over and over again, like wood or coal. It cost over time. Also, it's not very effective. If you've ever visited a chateau in person, you might have noticed that they are freaking cold all of the time. And even here we have to battle the cold quite a bit. That's because, like the plumbing, with the way that these houses were originally built, it is very difficult to install central heating. When I asked some plumbers about installing central heating here, they basically all screamed and ran away. So we've ended up with electrical radiators in every room, which has actually worked out very well because you can heat only one room at a time if you choose so to do, and because they actually are very effective for heating. But a central heating system does tend to keep things toastier, and while we don't have too much cold here, if you're in a chateau with big rooms, big high ceilings, it's just going to be really hard to keep the room warm. Really hard. So obviously practicalities tells us that you should build a smaller room, which is what we have. The reason you might not see that depicted very often in a period drama is because for filming a bedroom or a non-main room in a period drama, you still need to fit a camera crew as well as your actors in there. So a bigger room is going to be easier to film. It's also going to be more visually interesting because you have more space for your characters to move around. That's what people tend to go for when they're making a big production. It's like kind of like watching Friends, where there's a bunch of 20-somethings who are living in Manhattan in like a 5,000 square foot apartment. It's not realistic, but it's fun to watch. Another Regency life hack for keeping warm when it's cold outside, you can see here in the yellow bedroom. This is a bedroom that's been remodeled and it's got more of a 1930s theme right now, but you can see a trace of the Regency period if you pull out the bed. So I've pulled out the bed away from the wall. Please excuse the shop vac in the background. This is a construction zone. But if you look right down here, you can see where the original stone hearth was in this room. So in almost every room in the house, we have traces of where a fireplace was. In fact, we still do have a couple of the original fireplaces. I'll show you one now. Here in the dining room, we have one of our original fireplaces. In fact, this is the biggest one in the house. And it's pretty big. I mean, I can easily walk into it without having to bend over. We know it's original because, first off, it feeds into the original chimney. And because this is a room that definitely would have needed a fireplace. This is quite a large room. It would have been a communal room, and you would have wanted it to be toasty warm for everyone in the house to gather here. This is something we want to get working again. Theoretically, the wood burner and the chimney are functional, but we have not tested them out yet. So eventually, I think we want to put in a slightly different, more historical model of wood burner, but it will start working again and it will heat this room like it was originally designed to do. Another way in the Regency period that people controlled their climate inside the house was having super thick walls. This isn't even the full thickness of the wall. It also continues about this far outside of the window. And having this thick stone wall on all the exterior sides of the house meant that it would absorb the heat coming from inside the house and then radiate it back to you when things are cold in the winter. And also the opposite effect in the summer. It would keep things nice and cool. It wouldn't get too warmed up by the sun. It would keep things cool inside the house. It's basically a super simple, non-technological version of climate control. Here's a little better view of how thick the walls are in the whole house. This is the garage, which is on the first level of the house where the walls are the thickest. And you can see that it is just massive. Oh, I just quickly want to show you guys this as well. This crack, if you see that diagonal crack going up, this was the original stairway. So today, the main stairway of the house, excuse the messy garage, is over there. You can see it behind the furniture that I'm trying to move out. But originally it would have been over here. I don't know why it was moved, but it's just an interesting look into the past when you can really see like how things used to be versus how they were changed. This is our kitchen here at Everdeen, and I wanted to show it to you because it's a lie. It's not really a kitchen. It is a kitchen now, but it was not the original kitchen in this house. I think it probably started out as a bedroom or a sitting room or something of that nature. It's a slightly odd placement for a kitchen even now because we're on the second floor. I think at some point the house was divided into basically 3 apartments, with 1 apartment being on each floor, because there's just a lot of signs that kind of point to that. And so that would make sense to have a kitchen here. The mini kitchen that's on the first floor would have been a kitchen for that apartment. And the kitchen that's in the apartment downstairs would have been the kitchen for that apartment. But that's the one I want to show you because I think that's the original one from the house. To show you what I think was the original kitchen, I have to go outside through the garden and into what is called today the apartment, because it's still in the form of a separate apartment. Like I said, I think the whole house was like that at some point, but spider web. I have intense arachnophobia, so like that may come into play here. Ooh. Yeah, this door sticks. I have to kick it to open it, and also spiders don't like. But as we come into the apartment, this is why I think this was the original kitchen. This is a massive fireplace that may still work. This is one of the ones we have to look into. On the top of it, you've got these little jars. These are not from the Regency era, they're from later on, but you can see that someone was storing food in here. I probably should have mentioned before now, but I bought this house completely furnished. So everything in the house, except for a few things that I've bought, has been in the house for at least 50, 60, 70 years. Most things have been around longer, and we've made some incredible discoveries. Like we found a violin from 1923. We found a school child's notebooks from the 50s. We found old family photos. We just historical discoveries right and left around here. So you can really get a lot of clues about the people who have lived here over the centuries from just stuff we're finding lying around in drawers. The other thing that makes me think that this was the original kitchen is because you've got a cooking fireplace. You can see all the pots and pans and cooking implements. We've got an old toaster. We've got a big cauldron style pot. This little stand that you could have put over the fire to get your pot really close to the fire, nice and hot. And also because we've got a bread oven. This is really common in this era of house, and it's basically just a little bread oven. You cook your bread in there, you put it on the top to keep it warm. It's really efficient, it's really cool, it's a nice little look back into history. Plus there's the fact that this apartment is on the ground floor, which is almost always where kitchens would have been prior to the 20th century. Ground floor was for cooking for many reasons. And then this room here, which was turned into a bedroom at some point, would probably have been some sort of food storage, maybe a pantry, maybe more cooking places. I'm guessing food storage. While I'm out in the garden, I just want to show you guys one more remnant of life from the Regency era. That it's a pretty big remnant, I'm not gonna lie. I'm just gonna show you guys the outside today. But if you're interested, I have a full video taking a tour of the barn. The barn is over here, and then right over here behind the terrace where I've parked the car is the abandoned house. So this was actually a complex of 3 massive buildings: the barn, the house that was abandoned, and the house that is currently where I'm living. Those 3 buildings would have been owned by the same person and acted as one estate together. You also had a variety of outbuildings and terrace spaces. So for example, we have the terrace here that would have been maybe something for storing hay to keep it dry for feeding farm animals. It would have been a place to store machinery or farming equipment. And then I'll show you also my favorite outbuilding because it's a secret one. Speaking of historical archaeology, this garden is incredible. I've done a few videos working in the garden. I'll do another one soon. But you can really tell that someone planned it out beautifully well. And right here is what I want to show you. It's the pig house. We call it the pig house because inside you can see that there are stalls for animals to live in. We think they're for pigs because they're a little too small for cows, and it would have been a strange place to keep horses when you have a barn. So probably this was for pigs, maybe chickens. but it's a really nice little hidden spot. There's also a bunch of old roof tiles. Eventually this will get cleared out. Are we going to find a new use for it? I'm thinking maybe a speakeasy bar, maybe a sauna. But we'll see what happens, what we end up doing with it. I'm very excited to get to use this space. I'm going to finish up this video in the dining room because it's the room that I've just finished redecorating and I'm obsessed with it. I spend so much time in here now. If you're interested in that, by the way, I have a whole 3-video sequence of the entire renovation project of the dining room on the channel, so check that out. But what have we learned today? What would life have been like in Bridgerton era France? Apart from the obvious political and social issues, that it was a very tumultuous time, that France was going through a lot of changes, day-to-day life would have been really similar to our lives now. You might have woken up in the morning in a slightly smaller room that was being heated by a fire in your personal fireplace. Maybe it was a little colder than what we are used to now, but still quite comfortable. You might have gone out to make breakfast in the downstairs kitchen if you were the person who's responsible for cooking, or you might have waited for someone to bring you breakfast either in your room or in a downstairs dining room. If you wanted to take a bath, you probably would have taken a bath in a special tub brought into your bedroom and filled with water heated on your fireplace. And if you need to use the toilet, you might have had to go outside, or you might have used your chamber pot. All in all, I think there are so many similarities to life today, even when you're looking back at a time that was more than 200 years ago. But also, especially when you're living in a house like this, like I feel like I'm living that life in so many ways, partly because I'm inhabiting the same spaces that people living that lifestyle inhabited, and partly because those spaces impose certain things upon the way I live. It's really fun to do what we've done today and step back in time. And when you're here, it really does feel like a step back in time because it's all still here. Nothing really changes. You get a fresh coat of paint, you get some new furniture, but mostly this is it. This is the Bridgerton is still here. The Regency era is still here in this house. And it's really a joy and an honor for me to be able to find it all the time when I'm working here, and also to preserve it through the renovations that we're doing. If you're interested in the renovations, then you should subscribe, because I do videos every single week with different things about living in France, but mostly about renovations and about what we're doing here at the house and all the stuff that we're finding. If you're interested in a little bit more of an exploration, there's a full tour of the house as it was when I bought it that's on this channel. There's also a full tour of the barn and the abandoned house. And there's going to be another full tour video coming sometime in the future. I'm not quite sure when, because we're trying to sort out a lighting situation to light the thing we're going to do a tour of. But there's a mystery space that is going to be toured sometime in the not too distant future. And in the meantime, give this video a big thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed. And if you feel so inclined, we do have a Patreon that goes directly towards helping with renovations here. All the money from the Patreon comes right into Everdeen. And if you're a patron, you get little bonus things like a special bonus patron video every week, and a lot of little odds and ends that are quite fun. So yeah, check out the Patreon. It's in the description of this video. And with that, I am going to move on with my day back to the 21st century, kind of, because when you're here, you're never quite totally in the 21st century. And I will see you guys next time.